Another thing that we value here at TFRC is outreach, reaching out in the name of Jesus. And in a couple weeks, the Harvest Extravaganza will be upon us. It's the fall carnival that we do for families with kids 5th grade and younger. And it's also a chance for you to support the Thailand mission team. They'll be having a fundraising dinner. That's on October 29th, 6 to 8:15 p.m. More details are in your bulletin. It's a great way for us to invite the community to our campus. And obviously we need lots of help, either with setup or takedown or running different parts of the carnival, the games, candy and cookie donations. There's a table in the Octagon where you can sign up to help. And again, we need lots of it. One thing we're doing different this year, and we're really excited about it, is that we're going to have a special hour for kids with special needs. You could probably imagine what a crazy environment like the Harvest Extravaganza is with 800 or 900 people running all over the place. There's lots of noise. With kids with certain special needs, how that is not an attractive option to them. And so what we are doing is from, the Harvest Extravaganza is from 6 to 8:15, but from 4 to 5 p.m., we are going to hold a special time for kids with special needs. But what this means for us is we're going to need a whole new batch of volunteers. We guesstimate about 25 volunteers just to run this hour for special needs kids. And so if you would have a heart to help make that happen, again, that's also at the table in the Octagon for the Harvest Extravaganza. Again, we're really excited about it. We're continuing our series in Revelation, A Vision of Hope. And again, Revelation is not meant to inspire fear. It's meant to inspire hope. And if you grabbed an outline, on the back of your outlines, there's this backdrop to Revelation, and there's all sorts of little details about Revelation that are important for us to know as we approach the book. There's key differences between apocalyptic literature and prophetic writing, as well as many other things. But those are all very important for us to keep in mind as we approach the book. Revelation chapter 13 is probably the chapter that has inspired the most fear amongst us. And how we see chapter 13 is we see chapter 13 as a call to endure in the face of opposition. And we've asked Bob Forrester to read Revelation 13 for us. So Bob, if you can make your way on up to the podium. And as he does so, I'm going to ask all of you who are able to please stand and face the center of the room. And again, we read from the center of the room as a reminder to us where Scripture is to be in our lives, both as individuals and as a community of faith. Scripture should be central. And so, Bob, whenever you are ready, please read from Revelation chapter 13.
The dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on its horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear, and a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. People worshiped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast, and they also worshiped the beast and asked, "Who is like the beast? Who can wage war against it?" The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies, and to exercise its authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. It was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the Lamb's book of life, the Lamb who was slain from the creation of the world. Whoever has ears, let them hear. If anyone is to go into captivity they will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword they will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of God's people. Then I saw a second beast coming out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. It exercised all the authority of the first beast on its behalf, and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. And it performed great signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to the earth, in full view of the people. Because of the signs it was given power to perform on behalf of the first beast, it deceived the inhabitants of the earth. It ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. The second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image would speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666.
Thank you, Bob. You may be seated. You all feel better now? Again, for us, the book of Revelation, to adopt it, is to become people of the vision. And so far we've seen in the book of Revelation, again, different visions. A vision of Jesus, a vision of heaven and the throne room of God, a vision to the 7 churches that tells them, don't compromise, a vision of God being worshiped as the divine emperor. And our goal for this series is that TFRC would become a hopeful community communicating hope. And again, how much is that needed in our culture and in our day to day? Our society needs a group of people who are people of hope. And that's what we want this series to do for us, to become a hopeful community communicating hope. In light of current events, ISIS, Ebola, the culture wars, it's easy to get discouraged, it's easy to be dismayed, and it's easy to feel defeated. But I love what Pastor Brian said last week, that because of our faith in Christ, we are called to be better than that. We are not to be people who are defeated or dismayed or discouraged. We are to be the people of hope because of our faith in Christ. And again, chapter 13 has probably generated more speculation from the book of Revelation than any other. Again, the dragon, the beast of the sea, the beast of the earth, the mark of the beast, the 666. But yet Revelation was not written to encourage speculation. Revelation was written to encourage faith. And we see in Revelation 13 a vision of the call to endure in the face of evil opposition. You see, evil opposition is real. And the source of the opposition ultimately is the devil. Again, at the very first verse, the very first thing Bob read, the dragon stood at the shore of the sea. And throughout chapter 13, you hear about how the dragon gave at least the first beast authority. Well, the dragon is the devil. Well, how do we know that? Well, fortunately, it's one of the few places in Revelation that John tells us what the symbolism means. Revelation 12:9, the great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth and his angels with him. So John's message is not, hey, things aren't that bad. That's not what John is saying, nor is that what we are advocating. For John, the opposition was real, and it is real. And the evil one is against us. But let me just ask you, are we supposed to be surprised at that? Hello, shocker. Like, you never heard that before? Sometimes I wonder what we expect in our faith, that the evil one's just going to lay down and let us do whatever we want? That's not how it works. And the opposition is systematic. Let me just read a couple of the verses 6 to 8, 16 and 17. Let me reread them. It opened its mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. It was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the Lamb's book of life, the Lamb who was slain from the creation of the world. Verse 16. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. The opposition to the faith is not random. It's not discombobulated. There's an organized opposition against followers of Jesus. Now, I don't want us to become paranoid. Not every organization are tools of the enemy, but there is a systematic opposition to the faith. Again, why should we be surprised at such a thing? But while the opposition is real and while the opposition is systematic, in John's vision, the opposition is temporary. Verse 5, the beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies, and to exercise its authority for 42 months. Now, I've said a couple times up here that when it comes to numbers in Revelation, numbers are symbolic. I've said a couple times also from up front that 7, the number 7, which occurs often in Revelation, is a number of perfection or completion. 42 months, interestingly enough, is how many years? 3.5. Which, if for those of you who are, math folks, you quickly realize that's exactly half of 7. The opposition is not complete opposition. It's not total opposition. It's partial opposition. It's temporary opposition. The opposition doesn't last forever. Whatever form the opposition takes, it's temporary. John is saying in this vision, this is not going to last. It's real, it's systematic, but it's temporary. That's all part of the vision. In the backdrop, on the back pages is your outline, and we've said this a couple times, Revelation was written to first century Christians in Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey. And so we want to give a little first century backdrop, some first century imagery that as it relates to the book. And you've heard us talk about a couple times this family of emperors called the Flavians. And the Flavians, it was a little bit like a dynasty, although it was a short dynasty. There were 3 emperors who were all part of the same family: Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian. And they all reigned somewhere during the time that Revelation was written. We don't know exactly when Revelation was written, but it was most likely written during one of their reigns. And just a little backdrop on this family. In 66 AD, about 35 years after the resurrection of Jesus, Nero was emperor. And there was a revolt in Israel, the Judean revolt. And Nero sends one of his generals to Israel to suppress the revolt. The general's name is Vespasian. And Vespasian he goes to Israel, and one of the strongholds, the rebel stronghold cities, was a city called Gamla. Gamla is a city in Galilee, which was in the region that Jesus spent most of his earthly ministry 30 to 35 years before this. At Gamla, Vespasian is wounded in the head and miraculously recovers. And this miraculous recovery of his head wound becomes a part of the Vespasian legend. Because in 68 AD, Nero dies. And there is a year of political unrest. 3 different guys try to ascend to the throne to become emperor of the Roman Empire. And all 3 guys fail. And so there's great unrest until along comes Vespasian. And in 69 AD, Vespasian becomes the emperor of the Roman Empire, beginning a new dynasty. He leaves his son Titus in charge of putting down the Israeli revolt. And it is Titus in the year 70 AD who destroys Jerusalem and its temple, effectively ending the nation of Israel as a nation until 1948. Titus becomes emperor in 79 AD, and his brother Domitian, Titus's brother Domitian, becomes emperor in 81 AD, and Domitian is the guy who takes the imperial cult, which was the worship of the emperors, very seriously, obnoxiously seriously. So there's a general who miraculously survives a head wound. That's Vespasian. His son, and notice the head wound mentioned in verse 3 of Revelation. I find it hard to believe that those first century Christians would read that and not make some connection to Vespasian. That's hard to believe. And the emperor who demands worship and makes the city center of his worship, Ephesus, is Vespasian's son, Domitian. Now, a quick review of Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey. Go ahead and put the map up. And again, the 7 cities listed in Revelation are all in Asia Minor. What is today modern-day Western Turkey. Okay? You have Ephesus right there. Ephesus, church tradition says, the Apostle John eventually moved himself and his family, as well as, and I don't know if you remember Pastor Brian saying this, Mary, the mother of Jesus, to Ephesus, and that's where he does the rest of his ministry. He eventually is exiled to the island of Patmos, which is off the coast of Western Turkey, where he writes the letter of Revelation. Okay, but becoming and again, the term to being a worship center for either a god or an emperor is called Neochorus. Pastor Brian mentioned, I believe it was last week or maybe the time before that. A Neochorus is simply the city center of your worship, in this case, Domitian. Now, the cities in Asia Minor desperately competed to be a Neochorus, to be a city center of worship. Think Olympics, and think about how cities today compete to be the host city of the Olympics and what that means for them. Similar idea here. To be the Neochorus of, again, either a god or an emperor is a big deal. And places like Pergamum and Ephesus competed against one another. Ephesus, when they were chosen, they were thrilled to be the Neochorus for Domitian because of the prominence, the prestige, the becoming the it city. In Asia Minor, including Ephesus, the Romans were referred to as the people of the sea. And when Domitian chose Ephesus to be his worship center, his Neochorus, they built a humongous monstrosity of a gymnasium. Now, when I say gymnasium, don't think like gymnasium where we play basketball. Gymnasiums were more like universities. So when you hear me say gymnasium, think university. They built him this giant gymnasium. And Ephesus was a port city. It had a harbor. It was a major center of trade in Asia Minor. And the Romans built this gymnasium right by the harbor, right by the sea. And they put this huge statue of Domitian in it. Now you may ask, what does building a university or gymnasium have to do with worship and deity? Well, it's good for you to know that the god Zeus, the chief god among the Greco-Roman folks, he had a gymnasium on Mount Olympus. And when Domitian decided to build his gymnasium, he wanted it to be bigger than Zeus's. But not 2 times bigger, or 4 times bigger, or 6 times bigger, or 8 times bigger. Domitian's gymnasium was 20 times the size of Zeus's gymnasium. Do you think Domitian had a, ego problem? And he built it by the harbor of Ephesus. And when you build a gymnasium 20 times larger than Zeus, you're not just saying that we love Domitian or that we honor Domitian. We worship Domitian. But for the Ephesians, who were thrilled to have Domitian choose them, that gymnasium wasn't enough. And the Ephesians, who were called in Asia Minor the people of the earth, and interestingly enough, the beast of the earth was meant to force worship of the first beast, the beast of the sea, which sure seemed to have a lot of government or political clout. But they built a temple for Domitian on top of the Domitian, what they called the Domitian Square. Here's a rendition of it. You have Domitian Square here, which is built actually on a hill, but the hill wasn't big enough. And so these columns that you see in front were built to support the overhang of the square so that the square would be as big as they wanted it. And then you have this temple that they built on top of the square, that statue of Domitian, which I don't know if you remember how tall Brian said that statue was. Twice as tall as our ceiling. So when you see that statue up there, you can look up and then look up some more and then look up a little bit more. It's just this huge, monstrous statue of Domitian. It's on the other side of town from the harbor. What's interesting, if you show the next slide, if you look at it today, this is the same angle. This is what's left. Okay? Here's the hill, or what's left of the hill of what the square was built on. Here's the columns, one of the columns, that would have supported the overhang. And I just want to point out to you that Domitian's temple literally is coming out of the earth. So you have, if Domitian's gymnasium by the sea, 20 times the size of Zeus's gymnasium. You have Domitian's temple. These are both probably being built at the same time, if not simultaneously, real close to one another, but probably most likely at the same time, and it's all about Domitian worship. And if you don't worship Domitian, you can be killed by law. There are no civil rights. No one is going to stop Domitian. And Domitian killed hundreds of thousands of Christians and Jews. And as Pastor Brian shared, one number is it's potentially he killed as many as 2 million. So you're a first century Christian in Asia Minor, and you get this letter about the beast out of the sea and the beast out of the earth and the dragon who is behind it all, and he's coming to make war on us, and Domitian is coming. What do? Are you discouraged? Are you dismayed? Are you feeling like we lose? This is defeat. And John, in his vision, says this: if anyone is to go into captivity they will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword they will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of God's people. It's a call to be faithful. It's a call to endure. Because the temptation would be to compromise. One of the ways that you could compromise would be in the agora. The agora was the marketplace where you would buy and sell. And in many cities, in many marketplaces, there would be an altar for incense, and it would be dedicated to the god of the city, or during Domitian's time, it would be dedicated to Domitian. And if you wanted to buy or sell in the marketplace, you would have to take a pinch of incense and burn it on the altar of incense as your way of recognizing the deity of whatever god, or in Ephesus during this time, the deity of Domitian. And if you didn't do it, you couldn't buy and sell. Not sure if that's what the mark of the beast was, but it sure sounds a lot, it's in the ballpark of it at least. They would know, they would be familiar with this tactic because they've had to face it before. The Nicolaitans, who you've maybe heard about in Revelation, Their position was, go ahead and burn the incense. You don't mean it. It doesn't mean anything. Domitian isn't a god. No one else is a god. There's nothing wrong with burning the incense, so go ahead and do it. Which in John's vision says no. That's compromise. The mark of the beast. Again, it's another temptation to compromise, if you will. The number 666. Let's think symbolism. What number is that just short of? One digit 3 times. 777, which would be the mark for perfection. 666 falls short. Man's number falls short. More interesting for me is the location of it. And the number, it's interesting, calculating the number 666. Many of us, it's, well, whose number could that be? And I've heard guesses from Nero Caesar to Henry Kissinger. Some of you are like, who's Henry Kissinger? He was the Secretary of State for Nixon. Don't worry about your lack of history knowledge. Don't worry about that. It's fine. But all the way from the 1st century to 20th century, and I'm sure we've got guesses for the 21st century, who does 666 stand for? It's the number of falling short. The location of the number. Hands and forehead. And usually what we tell people is, hey, look, they're coming out with a tattoo, they're coming out with a microchip, they're coming out with a barcode. And it's going to somehow be coded 666. Now look, if you get offered one of those things, just say no. Okay? That's a bad idea. If they come out with a tattoo or a barcode or a microchip and they tell you to put it on your head, don't do it. Don't put it on your hand. Okay? What if it's something else? Again, if it's a tattoo, don't get the tattoo. What if it's not talking about a tattoo? What if we're missing it? Why the hand and the head? Is it simply because of the prominent location of those two places? Could be. Are they random locations? Could be. Let me ask you this. What belongs, if you are a follower of Jesus, what belongs on your hand and your head? We said it this morning. What's the greatest command again that Jesus said? Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. Where did he get that from again? Deuteronomy 6. Let's recite it again. Say it with me. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates. What belongs on your hands and heads? The commands of God fulfilled in Jesus. Now, as I said earlier, some Orthodox Jewish people back then and to this day took that command literally, where they literally will tie the commands of God on their hands and foreheads, little boxes. What if we were to take that in addition metaphorically? Let's just interpret Deuteronomy 6 metaphorically here for a second. What would it mean for the commands of God to be on your hands? And what would it mean for the commands of God to be on your heads? Well, I don't think this is rocket science. I think our hands are the symbol of what we do. And so the commands of God should determine or influence or dictate what you do. And your head is where you do your thinking. And so the commands of God should influence, determine, dictate how you think. Let's take the mark of the beast metaphorically. Again, if it's literally, skip the tattoo. What if it's metaphorically? What determines what you do? What determines how you think? Is it possible we have the mark and don't even know it because we are acting like and thinking like the beast? Ever think of that? Well, no, we don't have the microchip. We're good. Hello? What mark do you bear? By how you live, by how you think, by how we endure, by our faithfulness, in spite of opposition. What mark do we have? Because the mark of the beast encourages us to compromise, to not be faithful, to not endure. And there were men, women, and children back in the first century that did not compromise. I'm sure there were generations of men, women, and children, just like we had generations this morning being baptized, that did not compromise in the light of Domitian. And do you know what happened to them? They were killed for it. They died for it by the hundreds of thousands. Jesus said, "You are the light of the world." And I think these first century brothers and sisters of ours understood something about light that sometimes we forget. And that is that light shines brightest in the darkness. That they understood that as it got darker and darker and darker for them, that they weren't supposed to be discouraged, they weren't supposed to be dismayed, they weren't supposed to be defeated, they were supposed to shine brighter and brighter and brighter. They got it and paid it with their lives. It's the best time to shine when times get dark. And the theme verse that we've been sharing with you week after week after week, this is our call to endure. This is our call to faithfulness. But in your hearts, revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect. As it gets darker, that's our call. That's how we shine. Chapter 13 is a call to endure, to keep going, to keep moving forward. Yes, the opposition is real. Yes, the opposition is systematic, but it is temporary. It isn't going to be here forever. Remember the parable that Jesus told about the house on the rock, that was built on the rock? And he said the storms come, and the winds blow, and the waves crash, and the house stands. Domitian died. And after he died, the Roman Senate passed a law saying we're going to erase from public any memory of Domitian. And so any public monument, building, statue, whatever, that had his name on it was defaced, scribbled off, erased, whatever, gone. And you cannot find an ancient ruin with his name on it. And you know what I find even, not funny, but how many of you have ever heard of the guy? He terrified us for 15 years. And we haven't even heard of him. He's gone. It was temporary. Horrific? Yes, but temporary. As will be any and every opposition that comes our way. Everyone. ISIS, the culture wars. The call is to be faithful and endure. The storms come, the wind blows, the waves crash, the house still stands, and it will forever and ever and ever. Pray with me.